Hi everyone, welcome to Olive City Homestead. Kim here. So today I am doing the Zook Challenge. I know that most of you have great sweet bread and other zucchini type dessert recipes, but what about savory ones? I got this idea from Sarah at the Big Blue House Homestead. Sarah got the idea from Angie over at Doing Things Different. I guess Angie is just so overwhelmed with zucchini this summer that she really wants as many savory recipes as she can get. And Sarah provided one with a pizza bake made with zucchini, which I'm definitely going to be trying out soon. And I thought I would get in on the action because I do a lot of cooking and baking with zucchini. I do the regular stuff probably most of us have tried, like layering zucchini in lasagna, that type of thing. Zucchini chips, which are so easy, so good. But I did think, I have a few good zucchini bread recipes that are savory that I'd love to share with you guys. And anyone can do this challenge. Anyone can share with Angie and Sarah and me and everyone else. Just put the hashtag Zook Challenge on your video that you make, and then everyone will be able to see it and enjoy it and try it out. Now, if you've been following my channel, you know I had quite a battle this summer with the squirrels. As you'll see in the clips I'm about to show you, they just kept eating my zucchini leaves, and they wouldn't let the plants get big enough to produce fruit. And this is because we have such a severe drought going on right now. The squirrels are just desperate for any form of water and food that they can get. So yeah, they ate those down over and over. But in the end, the zucchini did prevail, or maybe I should say the tool prevailed, and I ended up with lots and lots of big zucchini. You know how that is. You get the little ones, but always bigger ones. They just escape you somehow. And yeah, you got to do something with them, right? So why not make it something delicious? Now, if you stay tuned to the end of the video, I'll share with you a great idea on what to do if your bread flops, as in it just doesn't bake no matter how long you leave it in. An hour and a half, 2 hours, it still seems sort of raw in the middle. Well, not raw, not gooey, but like the texture is maybe that of baked oatmeal. Has that ever happened to you? For me, that only happens up till now when I've used frozen zucchini. And even though I've done the whole thing of squeeze out all the liquid, occasionally I don't squeeze it out enough, and yeah, my bread might be a bit soggy. In today's video, I found out there's another way this can happen. It's when you use just too many veggies. Even if they're fresh, even if there's very little liquid involved in the recipe at all, if you've got too many veggies, you can end up with that same result. And so maybe I got a little exuberant, a little excited, and added a few too many veggies in one of the breads. But I've got a solution for that, and it provides another savory zucchini recipe that I'm going to share with you. So just make sure you watch all the way to the end. All right, so here is one of those 3 zucchini plants that the squirrels ate down over and over again. Oh, at least 5 or 6 times, guys. And I put tulle around it, and this one on the end that's so full of leaves, it was, for whatever reason, then left alone by the squirrels the rest of the summer. I don't know why they chose that one to be the favored one, but they did. This one was the not favored one. It was eaten down about 8 times and has now finally come back. 2 layers of tulle seem to have done the job, because not only did the middle one that had been attacked so many times finally survive, but this one down here has survived as well and is starting to bloom. But the big deal is this one. I've harvested probably 2 dozen zucchini off of it so far, and I just found another massive one in there, and a major massive one that was hidden under some dying leaves over here. I cut most of the dying leaves off, and this thing is humongous. You can't really tell from this angle, but when I get them out, you'll see. Meanwhile, the zucchini I planted later in the summer within this tulle from the beginning have done very well, despite me giving them almost no attention. I would have thought by this time they'd be petering out because we have had such a hot, dry summer, but they actually seem to have struggled through the worst of it, and now that as we are finally cooling off here in mid-September, they're starting to grow new leaves and new blossoms. So hey, that's great. We'll have zucchini into the fall. But that means, yes, we need more zucchini recipes. Okay, so time to cut some basil for the bread I'm gonna make. And maybe some green sorrel, because it's looking awfully good. I usually use it in stews in the wintertime, but it's delicious and I think it would taste really good in combination with zucchini, right girls? Creating, I must say, as I go, because that's the way the best recipes go, isn't it? Isn't it, girls? Uh-huh. You have a lot to say about it, don't you? Fresh green onions. Had to give the girls some green sorrel because they absolutely adore it. Gotta share in the bounty of the garden, right? Right. And they appreciate it. All right, so I think I've got enough sorrel here. Just want to give it a little bit of tang. And just a sprig or two of the winter savory. There we go. That looks like a good amount. Well, this greenery might not look like much, but when added to the zucchini, it is going to make one beautiful, aromatic, delicious, savory zucchini bread. Let's go. So these are the main ingredients you're going to need for the savory zucchini bread. Zucchini, of course, green onion or scallions, as they're often called. Mine are walking green onions, so you don't see the white bulb at the base because I keep those in the ground so they can keep growing perennially over and over and over. And in my opinion, the main flavor is in the green part anyway. And then we have the fresh basil and a variety of cherry tomatoes. I've got Sun Golds, Sweet 100s, Chadwicks, and black cherries. Obviously, you only need 2 small zucchini for this recipe, so you don't have to have a lot. I've got 2 different kinds here, as you can see, and that's fine. And here's one of your options, adding peppers. So these peppers include a variety that are in my garden. Not everything, but, you know, a variety. Got the purple auroras that are hot, the red jalapenos that are hot, the red snacking pepper that is not hot, it's sweet, a cubanelle that's turned red, it's not hot either. I don't grow a lot of hot ones. This is the peppermint stripe, which I find really interesting because they're striped when they're green, they're striped when they're orange, and then when they get to their final stage of red, they're also striped. They're sort of a neutral pepper-like flavor. They taste like bell peppers from what my kids say. And then the red sweet shishitos, which are sweet, and a green cubanelle. Now what I'm definitely adding in today is my green sorrel and my winter savory because I think that those will make wonderful, flavorful additions to the breads. What I think I'm going to do is make a second loaf that has peppers in it. That way, those of us who enjoy the peppers can have a loaf, and those of us who don't enjoy the peppers can have a loaf, and everybody will be happy. Now, you could do this the old-fashioned way and chop it up by hand with a good knife. More power to you if you choose to go that route. However, I am going to use my food processor, which I save just for this purpose of chopping up vegetables for recipes. The different options you could add to this recipe are almost unlimited. Of course, you can add other kinds of greens rather than the sorrel. I toyed with the idea of adding purple tree kale, which I'm sure would be great too. You could add chopped up spinach. I mean, just any number of greens and the amount that you want, just a tiny bit or a whole lot. You could add other kinds of herbs such as parsley. You could add other veggies in addition to, say, tomatoes. You could add in chopped up shredded carrots. I mean, the sky's the limit, really, when it comes to picking out what to add to a savory recipe like this one. Originally, the base recipe I found for this years ago just called for zucchini and green onions. And then I added in basil and more recently added in the tomatoes, and then today decided to add in the sorrel and winter savory. Of course, I have before used peppers, and that does work great, like I said, if you are a pepper person and enjoy them. And what else? Oh, cheese. Cheese is another option. This recipe is going to be either vegetarian or vegan. I haven't decided whether I'm going to add an egg. You don't need to, and it's easy to make it vegan. But if you wanted to, you could add cheese to it, or even a vegan cheese if you're going that route. So this recipe is super simple. It just includes flour, salt, and baking soda for your dry ingredients, which you put in your bowl first. You will then chop up, or rather pulse, all the vegetables you're going to add. And basically, you can get it to the consistency you want. Some people are going to want it a lot smoother. Some people like small chunks of veggies in their bread. And then once you get it to the consistency you want, you'll add in your 3 wet ingredients, which is I have a cup of water, a tablespoon of vinegar. You can use regular white vinegar, or you can use apple cider vinegar, and a third a cup of oil. Or if you aren't worried about dairy, you could use melted butter. You're going to add that to the veggies, pulse it in, then add that mixture to your dry. And well, that's really it. Then you're just going to pour your bread mixture into your loaf pans. And you're going to bake at 350 for 70 to 85 minutes. Really, it just depends on how many veggies and other options you add. If you added in cheese as an option at the end, that'll add some time to it too. Basically, it's the same testing method you use when you bake pretty much anything. You can put it says toothpick, but I'm always like, toothpick, that's going to go an inch into the bread. That is not going to help you. I use a butter knife and go all the way down to the bottom in the center. Make sure it comes out clean, then I know it is done. Now, I did not mention adding nuts to this recipe, but I have played around with that idea. I just think that nuts actually go better with sweetbreads myself. What do you think? All right, I've pulsed all my vegetables and added the vinegar, water, and oil to it. What I did was did it in 2 batches because I'm using a small food processor. And the first batch, which is in a mound here under the second batch, is chunkier. I didn't add any of the liquid to it. It's just vegetables. And then the second batch, after I had the liquid, I pulsed it a lot longer, and so it's much more liquefied. So what I think is going to happen here, because I did pulse this far longer than I usually do, is that my bread's going to turn out being green because of all the greens I used. Now, if you don't want that, if you want your bread to be brown with just chunks and flecks of green in it, then I would suggest, first of all, don't use as many greens as I did. Just the zucchini, the basil, and the green onions. Secondly, don't pulse your vegetables as long. Either chop them by hand or chop them in a blender, but don't add any of the liquid to it until you get the vegetables the size you want, the consistency you want. Or you could actually use a shredder and shred your zucchini and just chop up your onions and basil by hand. You know, that's totally up to you. Personally, I don't mind if the bread is green. That might even be kind of interesting. So that's the way I went this time. The other thing I'm doing, as I mentioned before, is putting in some cherry tomatoes, and I've started chopping these in half, and I'll do that with the rest of them, or the amount I decide I want to add. This, in my opinion, is kind of like adding chocolate chips to a sweetbread. I'm adding these cherry tomatoes to offset the greens in this savory bread, and I will blend them in with a spatula after I have mixed in all of this together. And then they'll go in the pans to bake. Look at this green batter. I love it. It's so cool. So I ended up adding in about half the tomatoes I thought I would. I think that that's enough, don't you? And you know what? This kind of looks like a Christmas bread now with the red tomatoes added into that green batter. We'll have to see how it looks when it comes out of the oven, but I'll tell you one thing, it smells wonderful. So I'm really curious to see how it's going to taste. Doesn't that look good? And our knife has come out clean, so it is done. This one took 80 minutes to bake. Even though that bread looked delicious, and even though the butter knife came out totally clean, and even though it had baked an hour and a half almost, it turned out it wasn't done. In fact, no matter how long I baked it, it would not have baked through because I put in too many veggies and I pureed them too much, so they were too liquefied. So that's 2 ways you can prevent that from happening. Put in the proper amount of veggies. Don't get exuberant like I did and, think, oh, the more veggies, the better. That's not always the case, not when it comes to baking. And then also, don't necessarily pulse and puree them to smithereens. I did that. I don't know if I wasn't paying attention this time because I've baked this type of thing a lot and I don't usually do that, but I did this time. So when I remade it, which I did twice, once gluten-free and once just regular again, I didn't actually use the food processor. I just chopped it by hand, and I was able to control the size of my veggies that way instead of making them basically liquefied. And I restrained myself and stuck to the proper portions, actually measuring them, which I don't usually do in cooking. But again, this is baking, so measuring is a good idea. But anyway, what to do with this bread that flopped, this bread that was like baked oatmeal in consistency other than the crust? Well, there is a way to save it, and it's a delicious way, and that is to turn it into croutons. Now, I'm not usually a fan of croutons. However, these are different. These are savory zucchini croutons, and they are out of this world good. Just look how yummy those savory zucchini croutons look. Now, after I made them with that flopped bread, I actually went ahead and made some also with the gluten-free bread that I used some olives in because, well, the first batch was so good, I thought, I have to have some of those with the olives. I bet they'd be great too. And they are. So see, you don't have to make croutons, of course, with, bread that's not all the way cooked. You can use regular bread too, as I did with these. And boy, are these good? I mean, fantastic Italian flavor with these olives added to all the spices. And the thing is, you can control how crispy they are. As I said, I don't usually like croutons, and that's because the only ones I've ever had when I was a kid and a young adult, store-bought, way too hard and crunchy and flavorless. These are smack full of flavor, and I bake them to just the chewy crispiness that I love. So good. And I'll include the recipe for them in the description below too. And so easy. Just cut them into uniform squares or whatever shapes you want. But pretty uniform is good though, because then they'll bake evenly. You don't want some of them baked too much and some too little. So yeah, that's the only reason for uniform. Coat them if you want with olive oil or melted butter. And then if you haven't seasoned it well, go ahead and add some salt and pepper or any kind of seasonings you want. With these, I didn't have to add any seasoning because the bread itself was so flavorful. And I'm glad I stuck with just a little bit of olive oil on top because they are amazingly good. So my flop, as often happens, whether in baking or in gardening, turned out to be a learning lesson, and I'm happy with it. Now, even though the first loaf of bread I made came out not quite cooked enough, and I had to do the whole crouton thing with it, which in a way was great, the second loaf I made, which was gluten-free, turned out fabulous. And in that one, I substituted some sliced olives rather than cherry tomatoes. And I learned my lesson from the first loaf, so I used half as much in the way of greens. And then I made a third loaf, and the third loaf turned out super as well. And it's just regular flour, and like the other two, it uses the zucchini as its main veggie ingredient along with the basil and green onions. But I didn't add any extras like tomatoes or olives. And that one turned out great as well. In fact, it's so good, I'm eating some right now. Take a look. Yeah, this one came out absolutely delicious. Now, my favorite way to eat a savory bread like this one is to toast it, because toasted with a little bit of butter, you just can't beat it. This is scrumptious. It's good just plain. I could snack on it all the time. But I also know it's fabulous with soups and stews on the side, or with pasta, like we made lasagna yesterday. It was great with lasagna. But no matter what you eat it with, or even if you eat it alone, you can't compete with a great zucchini savory bread recipe. And I will include all the recipes in the description below so you can bake them too. And I will include the right amount of veggie greens, the basil and onions, if you add any sorrel like I did, just to make sure you don't end up with a raw bread loaf. Well, I mean, unless you want to make croutons, but to be honest, you don't have to start with the underbaked bread to make croutons. You can start with any loaf of bread. So thanks for joining me today, everyone. I hope you'll try one of my savory zucchini bread recipes, or even all three of them. And I would love to try some of your savory zucchini recipes. So be sure to share them. And remember the hashtag Zook Challenge. I know that Angie will appreciate it, Sarah, I, and everyone else who's got a lot of zucchini growing right now, or who takes advantage of the great prices as zucchini are in season right now to buy them from the farmers markets, or perhaps get them from friends and family who've overgrown them. That's really not hard to do, is it? And yeah, I would love to see your recipes and try out as many as I can. Just remember, as you go about your cooking and baking this fall, you can create the life that you want. So don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. See you next time, everyone.